I actually do like Illinois
Yeah,
getting the 3 at Kansas. I
I
think I
figured.
even saw some 4 for a hot minute, but I like. I like a couple. The one I'm obsessed with, and I already told you I have the Colorado, uh, or I have the Nebraska at Colorado. The one I'm
Same.
obsessed with is Texas State. I do not understand what is going on with this line because I came on last week and I said GJ Kinney, the incarnate word last year, 52 points a game. Texas State offense is gonna be nuts this year. They go and beat Baylor. I can only assume that nobody watched the game and they just assumed Baylor laid an egg, weird Texas State upset, 27-point underdogs, whatever. That's not happening again. Because they open as plus 10.5. They're playing UTSA. Open as plus 10.5. There are now 13s offshore. So it's going totally the other direction. I mean, I would take like a Texas State alt -7. They're the better team. They're the better offense. You don't want to overreact like every smart person says, including you guys. You don't want to overreact to one data point. But we saw what the offense did last year. We see what it seems to be capable of this year. It's pretty much the same linear trajectory. I cannot believe you're going to give an offense this good 12.5 or 13 points. It's nuts. I never bet money lines at plus 300 in college football. And I bought Texas State plus 320 or whatever it was. So, I mean, I cannot take enough position on Texas State. This line is so bad.
What are your thoughts on the Oregon game? So obviously Bo Nix comes in. Oregon drops a school record in terms of total points. They probably could have scored 100 if Dan Lanning didn't take his foot off the gas.
I wanted to see it.
They're 6.5 points on the road to Texas Tech.
Mm-hmm.
What are you doing there?
Yeah, so it opened Oregon 7. And it goes to 6.5 pretty fast. Lubbock is a weird place where weird stuff happens. I think that's in the summary of whatever bet you want to consider here. I think Oregon. There's a good case Oregon's probably the better team. Trista, you probably watch more Oregon games than I have, so I think my answer depends on how confident are you in the 2023 edition of Road Game Bo Nix, and I would probably lean Texas Tech plus the points. I think 6.5 is a nice round number. I think they're undervalued now coming off of the Wyoming game. I mean, that was another one I had last week. Laramie's weird. It's high altitude. It's a hard place to play. They go there, they give up the late run, and they lose. And now they're kind of undervalued coming home to play against an Oregon team that I think they're live to win it outright. So it's kind of the total opposite ends of the spectrum in terms of what you saw from both teams last week, where Oregon wins by 1 million against Portland State and Texas Tech loses to Wyoming. I think Oregon's probably not that good. I think Texas Tech probably isn't a lose to a G5 team kind of bad. I think they're probably closer than we really realize. So I would lean Texas Tech plus the points at home.
Talking to Chase Kitty, BetMGM tonight. We talked certainly about overreactions and how we get that 1 week into the college football season, and there's a lot now around Clemson and LSU, specifically Clemson, obviously, with the way they looked against Duke, but LSU just the same. They were a complete mess in the second half of that game. They looked just like they didn't even belong on that field against Florida State. Some of it is that Florida State is a really, really good team. But out of Clemson and LSU, if you look at those two, which is the team you're kind of looking at more going, I don't know, maybe they're not who we thought they were?
Oh, good question, because you can make a case both ways. I
Right.
think more so Clemson. I think, 1 year's a blip. Once you have 2 or 3 years where you're losing games you used to win, you're not punching, you're getting 0 points out of multiple, first and goals from the 1. It just seems like they're not on the plateau anymore. And that doesn't mean they're bad, but they're maybe not playoff contenders. You don't want to overreact. I liked them to make the playoff 10 days ago, so I don't want to overreact. But if you're losing to Duke, there's probably a chance you're not a playoff team. And Duke's pretty good, but you're not a playoff team if you're losing to Duke. That just seems like a truism, even if it doesn't end up being true. I think LSU, you can make the case that, hey, they played a good first half. Great call by you, Ryan. I know we talked about it Saturday morning. They played a great first half. They give up a bunch of points in the second half. They're missing some guys. You can lose a top 10 game in week 1 and come back from it. So I think all their stuff is still in front of them. If they run through the SEC, easier said than done, you're still in position to make some kind of play at the playoff. I think Clemson, when you don't have the momentum of the last couple years, you're losing in week 1 to Duke. You've still got Florida State and Notre Dame on the schedule. It starts getting late pretty early, as the kids say.
Chase, can I get you to come on a journey with me this weekend. The party in the city where the heat is on, all night on the beach till the break of
Just was
dawn.
gonna ask that, so I'm glad you
Going
did.
to Miami.
Well, we got to talk Bama, Texas, obviously. But is this the stinkiest line of the week? You got Miami. So there is a 4.5 right now. Miami, 4.5-point dogs only, you would say, I guess, against A&M. Total in the game, 51. What do you like in this one, if anything? I like Miami a lot. I think Miami.
I don't know if
right.
I don't know if I like anything. I mean, it's a game to watch for sure, and I'm gonna have to come back and watch it because I'm gonna be in Charlottesville for the JMU UVA game, so I'm gonna have to come back and watch a bunch of homework. But I think I would lay off. My gut says A&M. My gut says A&M's the better team, and I don't really trust Miami's home field advantage, especially when the weather's still nice. But I feel like A&M's the better team. I think they're better at the line of scrimmage. The problem is, do you want to lay those points on the road? So I get the argument for Miami, but I would lay off.
Tyler Van Dyke. I don't know if you guys saw this. Trademarked it. Tyler Van Dyke. Now Tyler
Van Dyke. Yep.
And Josh Gaddis.
Is that why you're betting it?
No, I like Miami. I think like it's very rare that you get to see a head coach after 1 year get to reboot everything, and that's what they allowed Mario to do because they pumped so much money. So all the guys that I hated that he hired are gone. Kind of like Dion. Like I love what Dion's doing, but he's more of like a hype man. He's surrounded himself with a bunch of smart football people. Yeah. That's the way that you win in college football.
Yeah, no,
Dion's a comms guy.
Yeah.
Like that's his skill set.
Yeah.
It's the comms. It's not the X's and O's.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think, it moves them from maybe a team that, very much had a really poor wide receiver room in general with Travis Kelce kind of still in the fold. Maybe they're, borderline, I would say, like top 10 with Travis Kelce. But without him, you're looking at a team that has, probably like the second or third worst receiving unit in football. And like you guys said, like, Patrick Mahomes is, the greatest player in the NFL right now, the GOAT from everybody's imagination. But like without guys that can actively, I would say, separate both underneath and over the top, like there's only so long that he can actually extend plays. And I think that if you look at the wide receiver room in particular, it's even going to be worse than where they were at last year. And I think that absolutely has to be a concern that maybe Travis Kelce is healthy. Maybe he is closer to maybe 50% than 100%. Like that's still a situation that you don't really want to buy into. So I agree with the line movement. I agree with both of you guys' closing line value tickets coming up here earlier. And I do think that the Detroit Lions are very much looking like the correct side here on Thursday night, given the injury situation with Travis Kelce, but also the fact that, the Kansas City Chiefs are very much, I would say, a top heavy type team. How the Los Angeles Rams, I would say, won the Super Bowl 2 years ago. And any sort of thing that kind of disrupts the top of that food chain is going to be overall pretty detrimental to their overall outlook, I would say.
Wow. So how do you think then Andy Reid schemes for this Kansas City offense without Travis Kelce in the fold against a Lions team, which, let's face it, even with Jared Goff, very, very potent offensive weapons, and then you add Jahmyr Gibbs into the mix, and boy, does it get even more interesting.
Yeah, it does get really interesting. I think you got to go back to the fact that, the Detroit Lions going to be starting basically, 4 or 5 new secondary players in that defense. You have to hope that in some ways there are some breakdowns. But, where Kelce has been really good is in that, mid to intermediate depth type throws, especially on third down type situations. And if they don't really have a, marquee guy to kind of facilitate that intermediate routes, they're really kind of, dip and dunking with that Andy Reid type offensive scheme and then trying to hit, Marcus Valdez-Scantling deep. And I think that's where you really see this offense break down. So they need to find somebody over the middle. Hopefully it could be a guy like Kadarius Toney, although he's been much more of a gadgety type player underneath, getting those wide receiver type bubble screens. So if he's not the guy, they need a guy like Sky Moore, I would say, to emerge a lot quicker than expected, or else it is going to be, a lot of Jerick McKinnon coming out of the backfield on some of these wheel routes, on some of the, 8 to 10 yard out type routes. And I think you're going to see him have, maybe 5 or 6 catches if Travis Kelce isn't in the fold, and those need to be really successful. I think if the Chiefs are going to, I would say, kind of be able to keep up with this Detroit Lions-led offense.
Oh, Ben, sticking with the AFC, where are you at with the Buffalo Bills heading into the season? Obviously, last season, they were getting a lot of love. They were the Super Bowl favorites. And I just thought there was going to be a big drop-off from Brian Daboll to Ken Dorsey. And I know a lot of people like Ken Dorsey, but they converted on, 50% of their third downs last season. It was really Josh Allen being Superman. But there's a weird offseason with Diggs. I don't know if Gabe Davis is really a number 2. Where are you at with Buffalo? I mean, they're probably, I would say, the most popular pick in the East, unless you want to take a shot with the Dolphins or Jets. But I don't know what to make of them this year.
Yeah, I'm very much with you on it. I think the further you move out from kind of like the Brian DeBoll philosophy and the fingerprints that he had on this offense, it does get uglier and uglier in a lot of ways. And they really haven't, I would say, hit on that number 2 wide receiver option. They really do need Dalton Kincaid, I would say, to kind of manifest really quickly. And in an environment where we haven't seen a ton of real solid production at the tight end position coming from a rookie candidate, I think that's a really tall order as well. So if you fold in the fact that Stephon Diggs has seemed at certain points, disgruntled with both the offensive direction and maybe his role in it in general this offseason, like I do think this is a scenario where the wheels could potentially come off relatively quickly for Buffalo. And when that does happen, like there are teams, like you mentioned, the Miami Dolphins are very much kind of, I would say, in that next tier. I also think the New York Jets, although they do have a really difficult, starting schedule, I do think Aaron Rodgers fits in really well with what they're going to try and do offensively and defensively. They could have, one of, if not the best units in football. And with that kind of in the fold, with Aaron Rodgers playing, where he was at maybe 3 or 4 years ago, they could easily emerge as kind of that team to beat in the AFC East. So I think I'm actively fading the Buffalo Bills because I do think so much of their offensive success and that jump that we saw from Josh Allen was very much impacted by Brian DeBoll. And we kind of saw that with Daniel Jones last year. And I think the further the way that they kind of move from that, the more difficult it's going to be for them offensively and defensively. I just don't know if they have enough from a pass rushing perspective, I would say, to really be able to compete with some of these best teams in the AFC.
Just really quick to follow, it's funny because we talk about the AFC East and it's the Bills, the Dolphins, and the Jets, and now we don't talk about New England. How much can you upgrade them offensively just with Matt Patricia no longer calling the plays and Bill O'Brien coming in?
I mean, I would like to say I can upgrade him quite a bit, but I still think this is a situation where Mac Jones hasn't been all that, I would say intriguing of a candidate outside of his rookie season, and they don't really have anything, I would say, at the skill positions, especially at wide receiver, that I would kind of want to gravitate towards or buy into in a lot of ways. So they're once again still winning a lot of games with, a smash mouth type football game and a defense in the secondary that is really good. But without the quarterback play, I would say that at least get them over the top if they are down by a touchdown or even by 3 points kind of at the end of the game. That's just not a spot I'd want to buy Mac Jones at. So I do think that, they're pretty clearly the 4th best team or the worst team in the AFC East. And I very much think that's where they're going to finish. And I do think it's probably going to take, quite a bit of quality draft picks in order to kind of turn the tide for the New England Patriots. I just don't see them really hitting on any of those picks to actually be able to get back to where they once were.